What's up? How's it going? Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm going to switch the view to this one for a little bit while I say, what's up, everybody? How you guys doing? Shin Godzilla guy commented a little while ago, long before I started streaming, saying, I believe you can hear me. You should be able to hear me now, by the way. Saying Shin Godzilla is his favorite Godzilla, which is great to hear. That's obviously the one I'm repping, and that's the one in the thumbnail. Fabry? Is that how you say that? Fabry Creative? What's up? How's it going, man? Hey, y'all. How's it going, Isaac? Godzilla in Hell's Edits says, W, thank you. Isaac says, Demon, you're a talented piano player. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. What's up, Marco? How's it going, Alex? Hey, Mickey Mouse, what's up, man? I know, I heard about I need to look into it, because I'm really behind and out of the loop as it relates to Godzilla and everything. As far as news goes, I honestly don't really know much about I don't know much about this upcoming -1 re-release. But that's awesome. A 70th anniversary Godzilla's 70th anniversary re-release. I'll have to be on the lookout for that because that sounds awesome. November 1st, you're saying? And then I also know did they just release, or are they about to release the extended album for -1, which is very awesome. Oh, that's good to hear, Mickey Mouse. Glad to hear you're having a great day. My day's pretty good. My day's pretty good as well. Glad to hear that. I don't know if you guys know, but Godzilla 1985 versus Biollante versus King Ghidorah is on HBO Max right now. I did not know that. 85, Biollante, and King Ghidorah are on Max. I had no idea. But that's fantastic, because that's my preferred streaming service. So I will be taking advantage of that. Minus Goji says, Shin Godzilla deleted scenes, answering the question from our live stream title here. How we doing? Looks good. All right. Oh, how's it going, Calico Williams? How you doing? Super Delooper, hello. Mr. Bro, how's it going, man? Marco, what's up? Welcome to the chat. He says, I'm doing awesome. My birthday is on the 25th. Well, happy early birthday, my friend. I ordered the Super 7 Godzilla -1 figure with my birthday money. Hopefully it comes on that day. On the day. That is awesome. Did you get the minus color or the regular one? I'm really like bummed that I missed the regular one, the main release. I could always order it from another website, but even one of the people who's kind of one of the people who works for Super 7 DM'd me about my review of the minus color, and even he said he struggled to get a pre-order in for the regular version. Have you heard that -1 is replaying in theaters with bonus content? I did hear that, but I don't know many of the details on it, so that's going to be one that I have to look into because, oh my god, I can't wait. That is so exciting. Yes, some of the titles that are usually in distribution hell are becoming available finally. Alex talking about the Godzilla movies making it their way to Max, which is awesome. The Heisei movies are notoriously hard to track down the legal rights to internationally, and so it's nice to see that some of these movies, like Biollante, like Godzilla 84 or 85, are becoming available, and I remember like that 10-year, people talk about the 10-year drought between Godzilla Final Wars and Godzilla 2014. I didn't really experience that because that's when I was young enough to be just discovering Godzilla. But I'll tell you, it was so incredibly hard to track down Godzilla 84. It was so difficult. I got that, I think in 2016 is when I finally got that movie. It took forever. In my opinion, all right. Oh, here we go. Mickey, I think, is answering the question of the stream today. In my opinion, the most disturbing scene in a Godzilla movie has to be in the first movie, where the mother is holding her two kids while comforting them, that they'll reunite with their dad before dying. That is an excellent pick, Mickey. That is an excellent pick. Marco says the normal one. Awesome, man. You gotta let me know how that is. I still don't have it, so you gotta let me know how that is. Do you think you should get Kong's Survivor Impact? Minus Goji, I'm so behind on the news, and it feels a little nice to be this behind on the news, to be honest, but I believe that's the upcoming Monsterverse Kong game, and I'll probably get it. Yeah, I'll probably get it. Hello, fellow Goji fans from Puerto Rico. What's up, William? How's it going? Thank you for tuning in from Puerto Rico. Isaac says, funny story, I searched up Godzilla on Max without even knowing that fact until I saw Godzilla vs. Violente on screen. Then was myself really happy that day. That is wonderful to hear. I was just watching Godzilla vs. Hedorah on Max like just before I started the stream, so that's awesome. That'll be cool. I hope we see Godzilla interacting with the Oto Island people like in the novel, or show that he wasn't a mindless killing, but a victim like everyone else. Christopherson, if I had to guess, we're probably going to be getting more human scenes, less Godzilla scenes, or maybe, because from what I've heard, it's what, like 15 minutes of bonus content is what I think is what I read. Which could very well be like behind the scenes material. Not necessarily extended cut of the movie, I think. I'm going to change the lighting color just a little bit. Can't tell if I'm looking a little... I'm going to change this one. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to do that. That should have brightened me up just a little bit. If we're talking random things, probably the most disturbing thing is probably... What? Timidus? If we're talking random things, probably the most disturbing thing is probably Timidus, but it's probably going to have to be one of those Shin Godzilla scenes if we're counting about the movie itself. I'm not sure I understand Super. If those kids are like 5 years old and their dad died in the atomic blast, the math doesn't add up since Godzilla takes place in 1954 and the bombing was in 1945. Still an emotional scene nonetheless. Alex, I'll talk about that later this stream, but I think that's a common misconception about that scene, is that their parents died in the atomic bombs, but I'll talk about that later. The average Goji fan, I think the most disturbing moment, it's when Orga opens his mouth or when Hedorah killed all those people. Those are fantastic picks right there. IMO, one of the most disturbing Godzilla moments comes from versus Hedorah when Hedorah was killing civilians by flying over them. I completely agree. I hope that Kong game doesn't... I hope the Kong game does so good Warner Bros. Legendary and Toho greenlight a high-budget Godzilla or Kong video game. Mickey, I don't have my hopes up, to be honest. The most disturbing moment from Godzilla is seeing 1954 destroying Tokyo with his slow, horrifying G theme. Create a living nightmare with everyone screaming at their deaths. Yes, that whole attack is very, very well done. All right. I think I'm going to jump into the topic now. It seems like we got 70 views, or 70 views? Oh, 23 viewers. I was like, that's a lot of viewers for this channel at this time of day, especially because I don't stream very often anymore. So that surprised me. But okay, 23 viewers. I think that's enough people that we're going to jump into it here. And I've got the format of this is going to be a little different. It's going to be a little different than normal, but before we begin, I've been doing this at least in the background of one video, and I thought it was a neat thing, so I'm going to do this and hope that it doesn't get me in trouble, but I'm going to do that just because I think it adds some ambience to what we're doing here. Okay, jumping into it. Let me open this one for now, just because I like this one. This is my -1 stream setup. I think this is a cool one. Okay. Getting into the topic today. So first of all, I want to shout out one of my favorite YouTubers, Dave McRae. Dave McRae is, I've shouted him out in the previous stream as well. He's kind of similar to like what I do, except he's all about horror and the Halloween franchise. That's his main thing, but he's a horror channel and he's a filmmaker and he's just a big inspiration. I love his channel. I love his content. I love his style. And recently he did a video talking about the most disturbing moment in the Halloween film series. And I really liked his live stream on that topic. And it got me thinking, what's the most disturbing moment in a Godzilla film? And so before we get into it, I want to clarify what I consider a disturbing moment. What makes something disturbing to me might not be what makes something disturbing to you. So for my list, it might not line up with yours. And while I was listening to Dave's stream and he was talking about the one moment from Halloween that he considers the most disturbing, I kept thinking of different Godzilla moments and I was like, oh yeah, that's the one. And then I'd think about it a little more and be like, oh no, is it that one or is it going to be this one? And it eventually it kind of led me to making essentially a top 7 list, but it'll be a top 5 with some honorable mentions. So for me, what makes a scene disturbing? It's not fear exactly. It's not like the scariest scene in a Godzilla movie. That's a fun topic that we might be able to do for a different video or something like that. We could do what's the top scariest scene in a Godzilla movie. I kind of feel like it might be the introduction Odo Island sequence of Godzilla -1 might at the moment in my head take the cake. But it's not fear, and it's not death. I think that's something else that people get mixed up a lot. I see people talking about wanting like gruesome Godzilla scenes, wanting Godzilla to destroy, kill, and all this stuff. And I don't think that makes something disturbing. I also don't think that elevates the movies or the scenes. Having Godzilla specifically murdering with blood and gore and all this stuff that I see the analog horror community leaning into, which is pretty fun. And I see a lot of fanfic leading into like the bloody, gory side of Godzilla that's been unexplored in the movies. I don't think that necessarily constitutes disturbing either. I don't think violence is inherently disturbing, especially when it relates to Godzilla. So for me, what is going to make the most disturbing Godzilla sequence is going to be tension. How intense the sequence is and how much that lingers with me both during the scene and after the scene. The atmosphere of the scene overall, the tone of the scene, the implications both in the story as it pertains to what's happened before and what comes later. And more importantly, and this is for me the number one thing that makes something disturbing, the real world connections that it has beyond the movie. That's what I find really scary, is the thought of putting myself in those shoes to think about either if I was in this scenario or what this is a metaphor in the real world of. That's what I find to be disturbing. So, with all of that said, I think we're ready to jump into the topic. I'm going to try and see if I can change my lights here again to make them like this. I don't know if it'll actually register on camera, but I'm trying to add some red into the set, but not go too crazy with it. All right. I'm liking it. I'm liking you guys throwing out some suggestions here. Mine's the scene from Terror of Mechagodzilla where the cyborg girl where they show the cyborg girl's moving parts and stuff. William, I considered adding that to my list. I did not add that one to my list. Another destroying moment takes place in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 74 is the alien reveal on the travel boat. I guess that's a good one because he's stalking them, he's hunting them. I like that one. For me, my list might be a little weird. Also, let me know how the music is. There should be background music playing. I don't want it to be too loud, but I tried to put some moody Godzilla background music here, and I tried to come prepared with at least some visuals to keep this stream visually engaging. I have to rearrange this all real fast. Just get my setup going in a way that I like it. Okay. All right. Yeah, let me know how the music is. If it's too loud, I'll turn it down. If not, then I'll leave it. Okay, the number one honorable mention. This doesn't make my top 5 list, but this is an honorable mention. My number one pick that I was debating putting in. It is a very subtle scene that I don't think anybody would pick. I don't think any of you guys would think about it, but this for me, it was one that I really always think about. And it comes to us from Godzilla Raids Again. It's the quiet before the storm. So to set the scene, I was considering playing the clips from the movie, but I didn't go for it all the way. I didn't want to, it was going to be too difficult. So we just have some still images to represent the scenes, but I'll set the stage for you. An evacuation notice is sounded, putting an end to a dance party in Osaka. Within an instant, the city goes into blackout. All music cuts as we hear the rumble of fighter jets over the skies. A series of slow and foreboding shots reveal the silent city as the military takes position. That scene, I think, is really, really creepy because it goes way beyond the scene itself. First of all, I love how slow the pacing is. It's really slow and deliberate. And what makes it so creepy is this eerie quietness, the implied danger of what's going to come. We know Godzilla's gonna make landfall. We know the disaster that will await. And they don't have to lay it on too thick. It's just this implied danger, this really heavy foreboding sequence. And the reason it is so creepy is because it connects to the real world wartime blackouts, which were experienced just at this point 10 years or 11 years or what, at this point 1955, 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago in Japan, they were experiencing this regularly. These wartime blackouts that would happen right before an air raid attack, when enemy bombers would fly overhead, dropping bombs on civilians. That's really creepy, and it's really creepy the way we connect back to that in relation to Godzilla. Creating Godzilla, it builds up the idea that Godzilla is the war incarnate, coming back to Japan to kill innocent people and to knock the city down. It's really creepy. Godzilla Raids Again is not a movie that I think always nails what it's going for, but that sequence I think really does. That sequence is really creepy in my opinion. It's just slow and ominous and dark and moody, and I really love it. This is also, the pacing of that scene is a little slow, so the pacing of the whole movie is slow, so I understand if people don't love it, but for me it really works. Yeah, average Goji fan. I tried to pick some ones that really impacted me, so they might not be the same ones for everybody's list, you know? I remember watching this movie at my dad's work. I found another moment, this time takes place in GMK, where Mothra basically kills a few people when they try to drown a dog. That scene I don't think is disturbing, but that scene definitely freaked me out as a kid. I appreciate the terror of the scene where Godzilla surfaces near the party boat in 1954 and everyone panics. They're helpless out there in the water. Yeah, it's a great pick as well. Hey D-Man, how's it been? Do you think that Goro Maki is a part of Shin Godzilla? Gonna make a video on it? What's up, Rick? How's it going, man? I hope you're doing well. I do think Goro Maki is a part of Shin Godzilla, and I could definitely make a video on that at some point. That'd be, I've been wanting to make that video since literally 2016. I don't know why I haven't. I hate loud noises, so I definitely understand why that's scary. We had a tornado hit in, Titsasville a couple weeks ago, and it reminded me of Godzilla. Like they just attacked my hometown. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Marco. I hope everybody you know is doing well. Average Goji fan, I can do that as another video. But yes, that's my first scene, I think, is that very ominous Raids Again sequence. Next up, this one is one that I really debated putting higher, but I put it down lower for a few reasons. And that is the parking lot attack from GMK, which is a scene I think many people think of when they think of the horror element of Godzilla. So to set the stage once again, After a long supernatural buildup to the discovery of multiple mythical monsters, the resurrected Godzilla makes his return, proving everyone's fears right. Godzilla acts deliberately and with malice as he goes out of his way to knock over cranes, stomp bridges, and trample his way through neighborhoods. Following the iconic hospital attack where Godzilla finishes the job he previously started by killing a young girl who disrespected the memory of those lost in the wartime era, we find ourselves in a grocery store with a bunch of guests being urged to evacuate. One woman is annoyed. She's annoyed about Godzilla's return, as if he's just an inconvenience rather than a true threat. She runs out into the parking lot where she sees him passing the store. And as she screams, Godzilla, in a rare moment, turns face to face with one of his victims, looking at the fleeing people in the crowd until he spots where she's at. Then, in a moment of deliberate action, Godzilla snarls, showcasing his terrifying design with those whited out creepy eyes, charging his beam, and we cut to a school, where the shockwave hits and the children look out the window to see a mushroom cloud raising into the air. This scene, I think, is one of the most memorable in the Godzilla sequence, and there's a lot that I think, in the Godzilla series, and there's a lot that I think plays into that, but there's a reason why I didn't consider this to be truly disturbing. Because initially, this was one of the first ones I thought of. The idea of a bunch of school children looking out the window and seeing a mushroom cloud raise into the sky, and the teacher thinking it's an atomic bomb, is really, really unnerving. I think that's all great. And even the fact that it's set in the daytime, that was originally something that I was like, I don't know. I don't mean to say that daytime sequences are always going to be less scary, but there definitely isn't as much mood or tension in the daytime, I think, as there is at night. And so the daytime, I was wondering if that kind of throws the scene off, but I actually think it helps because that's what it would have looked like back in 1945. America didn't drop the atomic bomb in the dead of the night. They dropped it twice during the daytime, and that's what you would have seen if you were far enough away. Just this odd mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Unexplainable. That is a scary thought, and that is unnerving. There is some other things that I think really play into the fact that this scene is disturbing. And that's the children looking at the children looking at the damage and how that'll weigh on them. If you think about that, that's pretty freaky. Also, the fact that Godzilla is so deliberate and is doing things intentionally. He's looking at people. He's specifically locking in. It's one of the rare times Godzilla deliberately kills people specifically. The fact that Godzilla picks a target who's screaming at him and that's the reason that all of those people die. He was just gonna walk by that building, but she screamed, and for some reason, it annoyed him enough to blow them all up. That's freaky to think about. But the thing that really throws it off is that there's a real dark humor to the whole sequence. I think Mickey Mouse is saying this too in the comments here. Call me cruel, but I found the scene with the hospital to be funny because of the way it was shot felt more comedic than scary, and I completely agree. There's a real sense of dark humor and irony to the fact that Godzilla walks past the hospital and then slaps it with his tail, killing this woman. And it's the same way in this parking lot sequence where Godzilla is gonna walk past this annoying woman who we, the audience, already have something against her because she was just complaining and putting down Godzilla as if he wasn't a threat. And then we get to see her essentially get her comeuppance with him killing her. It's that I think throws it off, and this whole sequence I don't think has mood or atmosphere or the life of the rest of the things on the list to come. But I do really like the malice Godzilla has, that he shows towards humanity. That's creepy. So that's why it didn't make the top 5, but I still wanted to give it a shout out because I do really like a lot of elements of that scene. Now we're getting into my actual top 5 list, and this is where it's gonna get a little different. I don't know how many people are gonna put this scene on their list, but when I think of scariest scenes in a Godzilla movie, this one is one of the first that comes to mind. And it was one that stuck with me as a kid. It terrified me as a kid, and looking back on it, it really is a disturbing sequence for a lot of reasons, and I like that about it. So my next one up is going to be the fish tank of horrors from Godzilla vs. Destroya 1995. After becoming suspicious that the soil in Tokyo Bay may contain traces of a powerful new form of radiation left behind by the oxygen destroyer 40 years earlier, scientists discover that a life form escaped their soil samples and is on the loose. A security guard walks around an aquarium doing his nightly pass. Again, it's a series of slow and deliberate shots that draw out his discovery. He hears a strange hissing and goes to investigate, as a series of flashing lights begins to draw his attention. He stumbles upon fish being electrified, decaying into bones rapidly before his very eyes. Soon, all the fish in the tank begin to disintegrate, mirroring the use of the oxygen destroyer sample in the original Godzilla, making it clear that this new rival to Godzilla has been born, one potentially far deadlier than he is. That scene freaked me out as a kid. I also thought about putting the part on the list where all those policemen are running through the building and all the Destroya critters are like dropping through the ceiling. That very Aliens sequence. I thought about putting that on the list as well. I don't think that one really is as disturbing as it is scary, I guess. But this scene I find really disturbing. The idea that these things are being disintegrated in front of him. And one thing that I think is really creepy to think about, and I don't love it because it kind of spoils Serizawa's sacrifice in a way, is the idea that Serizawa in an attempt to save the world used the oxygen destroyer to kill Godzilla, and in doing so gave birth to something far worse than Godzilla in the form of Destroya. I find that idea to be really disturbing. The idea that Serizawa would die to be a hero, only to have his death wind up killing a bunch of innocent people way down the line in an act that he could have never foreseen. I find that to be really, really disturbing. And I just think that whole sequence is great. There's a lot of atmosphere. It's really drawn out. And they knew what they were doing when they were creating that scene, making it as scary as they did. And it really helps build up Destroya as a very horrific opponent for Godzilla. That scene, the scene when Destroya, like I said, that alien sequence when the Destroya critters are attacking all the policemen, that scene builds Destroya up as being really scary. And so it makes it more justifiable when Destroya can put up as good of a fight as he does against Godzilla. They did a really good job with that, I think. You know, I was going to talk about a moment in Versus Destroya, but I was debating on it. What moment were you going to talk about? Serizawa literally predicted what would happen if he exposed his creation to the world. I know, and it's really sad to think about. Watching the mini Destroyas, I forgot what they were called, ravage the city was pretty disturbing because you know Destroya is much worse than them. Oh, I see what you're saying. You know what's coming soon. I like that. That's good. I like that. Yeah, you're right. His worst fears came true in Godzilla vs. Destroya. They sure did. They sure did, and it's real sad. All right. Next one on my list. This was the very first one I thought of, and this was the one that inspired me to make this video. But the more I thought about it, the less I felt it was as disturbing as the other examples. And I have a feeling that some of the other ones I have on this list are not going to align with you guys. But this is one that I wanted to put on here. I feel like this will be higher on most people's list. And by the way, I'm not counting deleted scenes. I saw some people suggesting deleted scenes from Shin Godzilla with the googly eyes and the blood. I'm not counting deleted scenes, but next up is Shin Godzilla's final evolution for so many reasons. After a brutal fight against Godzilla, it seems Rando Yaguchi and his team have finally secured a partial victory against Godzilla, who stands frozen in place at the heart of Tokyo. One thing that I think makes this more disturbing than many people talk about is that With the threat of nuclear violence against Godzilla in Tokyo, if Godzilla were to reawaken, Yaguchi accepts the responsibility of trying to find a way forward and coexist with Godzilla. And the idea that Godzilla might be reanimating in that final scene not only means that Godzilla is going to once again go on the rampage, but means that that nuclear countdown will restart, meaning that their work is kind of in vain. Just as it seems like we've reached a happy ending for the movie, Yaguchi says things are still far from settled as we cut to Godzilla to reveal his tail has entered its next evolution. Godzilla, taken down by committee, creates a committee of his own, one that combines himself with the creatures that defeated him. I gotta sneeze. Sorry, excuse me. The implication that Goromaki's DNA, we talked about this a little bit to Rick if he's still here. The implication that Goromaki's DNA is still inside Godzilla, giving him rage, intention, and a target, along with the fact that the nuclear threat is still around, creates a really, really intense feeling. Like, I find the idea that Maki is merged into Godzilla to be really unsettling already. And I know a lot of people talk about Shin Godzilla like he's such a victim because the song Who Will Know is written supposedly from Godzilla's perspective. I don't think Godzilla's a victim in Shin Godzilla. Godzilla is the one who is making everybody else his problem. And I think that comes down to Goromaki. Goromaki was a victim of bad circumstances, and he took it out on innocent people. I choose to believe that Maki's in Godzilla, and I think that's why the humanoids are born the way they are. And what makes this so perfect is the slow reveal of that tail with absolute silence. The dead silence helps make that moment so scary as the nightmarish humanoid designs are revealed, and they are perfectly designed. They are the perfect Godzilla-human hybrid with that creepy factor. Their weird faces are amazing. I love how one of them looks like he's screaming in agony. It's really creepy. And the final implication that no matter what humanity will come up with, Godzilla will always counter and eventually come out ahead of them and on top. It's what really nails down the shocking ending of this movie and what really makes it so disturbing. The idea that no matter what they do, Godzilla will always evolve to counter them. That's a freaky thing to think about. And not only do they look scary, but the idea that there's going to be so many of them to deal with is also freaky. And those things are bigger than you'd think. They've got to be like in the 50-foot range, right? Or like 25 to 50 foot, I suppose. Like, they've got to be bigger than you'd expect. I think that whole sequence is really, really creepy. And the fact that it just ends. There's no explanation given. We don't get an answer. We haven't had a follow-up to find out how things turn out. It just ends. That's really freaky. And it's freaky because it doesn't give us an answer, because there are no answers to the question Yaguchi is talking about. If we substitute Godzilla for the atomic bomb, which Godzilla doesn't necessarily represent the atomic bomb alone in Shin Godzilla, but if we substitute Godzilla for the atomic bomb, the thing that he's always represented, then that scene becomes even scarier, because it's real life. Yaguchi saying the only way forward is to try and find a way to coexist. Cut to things can get much worse. These weapons are a lot scarier than you may think. I don't know. I find the idea that there's no answers really unsettling. I really love that scene. I think it's really, really great. This is the one that I think is going to be really controversial and is going to be on nobody's list. But this is a type of real world horror that I think is really, really creepy and really messed up and really disturbing. And it's not going to be a popular answer at all. And that is being groomed for extinction. And this is from Godzilla the Planet Eater, and it's hard to nail down one scene in particular as much as the entire plot line. But I guess the scene that I'll pick is the scene where Haruo walks up the hill. He sees, who is it? Miyana, I think Miyana tied up to the altar. Mephi's standing there as Ghidorah comes out of the sky. Mephi's is yapping, and then he turns around to reveal his eyes gouged out, and he explains he's the one that caused all this. The Planet Eater is a movie that I think has no shortage of disturbing moments, from the sacrifice of all the unknowing religious people to awaken Ghidorah in the first place as he's slicing through their faces and eating holes in their heads and creating himself in this world. That's already pretty freaky. To the reveal that Ghidorah is distorting space and time itself, revealing that the crew of the spaceship is already dead on the vitals before they're actually killed, the movie knows how to creep out the viewers and unsettle them. That scene I think about all the time, when they find out that they're already dead because Ghidorah distorts time, so their readings are showing what's about to happen and there's nothing they can do to stop that. That's really creepy. Or the scene when Ghidorah's coming out of the sky and Martin's trying to scan him and he can't see Ghidorah on the scanner. He can only see the way that he's affecting reality, and he's like, this thing's not even from our universe. That's another thing that I find to be really creepy. I love it. I think that all works really well. But it's the drawn-out reveal that Mephes has spent his entire life preparing to summon Ghidorah and picked Haruo as his target to make that possible that I find really, really unsettling. It brings this whole movie to another level for me, and it's why I think the trilogy works on a thematic level more than many other Godzilla films. And that's a controversial thing to say, but I really think they knew thematically what they were doing with these movies, even if the execution was a little more bland than we were hoping for. But the idea that Mephes has nurtured Haruo's hatred for Godzilla specifically to set him down a path and encourage his obsession that would eventually lead to getting his friends, family, everybody he knows killed. The fact that Mephes has been the one killing some of his friends and family in order to make him more vulnerable, I think all of that is incredibly frightening. The thought that Mephes set him down a path of self-destruction that would eventually get everybody he knows and loves and is fighting for killed, that's really creepy to think about. Haruo being groomed since he was literally a child is really messed up. He's essentially being groomed by a serial killer to lead all of his friends and family to that serial killer so that they can be his victims, is essentially what's happening in that whole movie. It's the idea that Haruo has essentially become the tool in which the serial killer can enact his messed up plan upon all of the people that this person loves. It's really, really messed up. That is super disturbing, and that's this type of real world disturbing that I find to be really effective. To think about if you are in that position. What if you are in that position and you don't know it? What if somebody in your life is a toxic, bad influence on you, and the things they're telling you and convincing you to do or believe right now, those things eventually down the line, those things are gonna get you or somebody you love killed. That's really creepy. And I don't know, the way it all plays out throughout the whole movie, I think it really works. The way that Haruo's memories are being infiltrated, and he's having these memories of his childhood that are being used, first of all, to taunt him, and also to force him to confront the faces of the people that he believes he's gotten killed, and making him feel even more responsible for everyone's deaths than he already feels, all in a way to wear him down and groom him into a position where he will hand himself over to Ghidorah. It's really creepy, but I love that idea that even looking back on his memories, he's now seeing Ghidorah instead of Godzilla. He's now seeing Mephes instead of his parents. And you're realizing that Mephes, basically a father figure for him, has influenced this kid since he was literally a child. Like, from such a young age, he's been manipulated by this person to become what he is, and there's nothing he can do about that. The only option Haruo has at the end of that movie is to kill himself as a way to get Mephes, his surrogate father's teachings, out of his head. Also, he's literally got Mephes in his brain. But to get this guy's influence out of his head and to rid this guy's influence from the entire world, I think is really creepy. The fact that from the point when he was a kid, his only option was either to lead his entire species to extinction or to kill himself. Those are the only things he could essentially do from the point he was a child onward. And the fact that he essentially had to do both is really, really messed up. I think those movies really work. I think they nailed thematically what they were going for. I see chat somewhat disagrees. Still salty about Mechagodzilla. I hate the anime, had a lot of cool ideas, but were executed horribly. I don't think any of that was executed horribly. I think the thing that was executed horribly was the fact that people wanted monsters battling and they weren't. Because from a thematic standpoint, the movies really work. And they work from a storytelling perspective. Where they don't work is from a spectacle perspective. And that's okay, because that's not what they were doing. Not every movie needs to be a major spectacle. I don't think that every movie needs to be, and I really like the variety in the Godzilla series. I like that we could have a movie like Godzilla Kong the New Empire, absolutely no substance, but all style and really crazy action and fun and turn your brain off and monsters battling. And we can have a movie like The Planet Eater, where the monsters don't even get to fight because one of them's not even in our dimension the whole movie. But the plot is really strong. See, Marco? At least see, if I can do anything here. If I can do anything here in the way of convincing you guys to give these movies another shot or take another look at them, then I'm considering this whole stream a victory. And if I can even convince Marco to give these movies a rewatch, that's a win for me. Geo Channel says he might give them a rewatch as well. Yes, Acno, it sure is. It sure is. Big Daddy Godzilla is getting himself dinner right now. Another disturbing moment from Godzilla vs. Hetero is the staircase scene. Yes, that scene was one that I considered putting on the list, but I didn't think it had as much real-world disturbing elements. Godzilla the star-eating wings is basically the Ghidorah fight done better. Godzilla star-eating wings, I have no idea what you're talking about. Themes and style are everything when it comes to the movie and film industry. I completely agree, and I think those movies have good style. They just don't have the spectacle that audiences were expecting. I think those movies really suffer from expectations versus reality, and the expectations were too high. And even the filmmakers wanted to do those things. They wanted to do the things that we were expecting them to do, and they didn't get to. But what they gave us, it works as itself. It doesn't work when you compare it to what you wanted it to be. But it does work. I will stand by that forever. Those movies work. They just don't work the way we wanted them to. And people like me can really embrace that. Well, now I might have to sit down and watch them. I would recommend it, Dan. Watch them all in one sitting. It helps breeze through the fact that there isn't as much spectacle going on in those films. Or me and my little brother watched those movies in a very different way. We watched them in 20-minute segments as if they were episodes, which drew out the suspense. And for the two of us, that helped. I mean, I had already seen them. I watched them all when they came out, watched them in one sitting. But when I showed them to him, I showed them to him in like 20-minute segments. And it really drew out the tension and got him really invested as if it was a TV show. And so when you had episodes where there'd be a little bit of kaiju action, for him, he was crazy for it. He loved it. And it took away the pain of the fact that there really wasn't as much going on as you'd hope, action-wise. But plot-wise, those movies are really rich. I don't know, I never hated the Godzilla anime. I loved the designs and how the humans had to fight Godzilla when he was huge. I agree. I missed the beginning of the stream. Did you talk about the scene in the first film where the kids are crying over her dead mother? That scene haunts me. We have not talked about that. Definitely worth a rewatch viewing them with a different point of view. Let us see how I perceive them after a rewatch. Let's see how I perceive them after a rewatch. Alright, Killiko, I hope you enjoy. Godzilla Starting Wings is a MMD video made by a YouTuber named Cannon. Oh, I kind of remember these. And the video is basically Godzilla the Planet Eater final fight done in a more likely direction. I think I've seen them. Is he the same one that did the one where Mechagodzilla and Godzilla battle it out? That was a good animation as well. Shin Godzilla's second form / stage is so creepy. A lot of people think that the Actually, a lot of people think I've seen that Shinagawa-kun is the creepier one because he can barely walk on two legs. And I've seen people think that's really creepy. Will there ever be a human Hanuman versus Godzilla? It must happen truly. I doubt it. Toho will never allow. Yeah, there we go. It's been years since I've joined a D-Man live. Good times, man. Well, welcome back, Rex. Welcome back. How you doing, man? Thank you for tuning in. All right, it's time for the number 2 on my list. The number 2. This one was gonna be my number 1 because it is the only one that continued to hit as hard for me. I know that this isn't going to be the case for everybody. I know some people said it hits really, really hard the first time and not as hard the second time. But for me, the scene hits really, really hard every time. And that is in Godzilla -1. After the most spectacular atomic breath reveal we have ever seen, Shikishima stumbles into the desolate streets of Ginza after an enormous shockwave hit the city. His breathing is so intense as the wind, the sounds of his feet under the rubble, the shifting of paper in the wind pick up. As he begins to cry, thunder crackles behind him. Noriko is gone. Shikishima's love is gone. And he finds himself alone. He turns to face Godzilla, who stands amongst flames, looking up at a growing mushroom cloud. That scene is so creepy. The fact that Shikishima's alone in the streets with Godzilla is already creepy. The fact that he turns around to face Godzilla, the person who he believes just killed his love, is really creepy. The mushroom cloud, I think, is done in a lot more of an unsettling way than it was done in GMK. But the thing that takes it to another level for me is Godzilla. Godzilla standing there looking at it, just watching, is so freaky. I think that scene is so good, and it doesn't stop there, because Godzilla bellows a massive roar and then resumes his march as if nothing happened. And as Shikishima screams in rage, black rain pours down from the sky, coating everything around. That is what takes this to the next level. So then the operatic music swells up as we see not just Shikishima screaming in the black rain, but hard cut, the aftermath, and you see just how widespread and devastating Godzilla's atomic breath truly was, and how there's nothing left. Nothing but Shikishima in that rubble. It's really upsetting. There's a lot of things that I think makes this scene work as well as it does. Some of those things, some of the smaller things that make this scene so disturbing are the really slow pacing as Shikishima walks out. The sound design is really wonderful. I love the way that pretty much all the sound drops out and we hear just the sounds of the fire crackling, the thunder in the sky, the paper blowing through the streets. That all works really well. It's really dense with atmosphere, and the seeming death of Noriko, regardless of the fact that she lives, I think is really upsetting, even when you consider the fact that she lives but she's permanently scarred by Godzilla with that thing on her neck. It's not a purely happy ending, and so the scene still holds its weight on a rewatch. But it's not done there. Because, like I said, the two things that really set this scene apart and really sell it are Godzilla and the real-world connection to Hiroshima. Those things really, really make this scene work. Like I said, for me, the idea that Godzilla is standing there watching the mushroom cloud, that makes it so unsettling. And that shot, the one that I have there in the corner there, that shot of Godzilla standing there looking at the mushroom cloud is, in my mind, my number one Godzilla visual of all time as of right now. For me, right now, that's my favorite Godzilla visual because it perfectly encapsulates the metaphor that is Godzilla's entire filmography. That is so perfect. And there's so many things that make it so perfect for me. And the thing that really helps is the fact that Godzilla is such a subjective character. You have to interpret his emotions for yourself, because Toho, first of all, Toho doesn't really like Godzilla to be overly emotive, but they keep it vague enough. Takashi Yamazaki kept it vague enough to where you really have to work to try and think, what is Godzilla thinking? Yes, it is live. It is live. Welcome to the live. But that all works really well. And there's so many things Godzilla could be thinking in that scene that make it so creepy. On the one hand, maybe he's proud of himself. Maybe he's looking at the mushroom cloud and he's proud of himself for having taken revenge on humanity by unleashing the exact same weapon they used on him back on them. Godzilla has successfully turned the tables and done exactly to us what we did to him, and that's really creepy to think about. And it's weird and upsetting if he's proud of that, but maybe it's even more disturbing if he's in awe of it. Like if he didn't even know he was capable of doing something that devastating and he's standing there in complete shock and awe at himself. That's also upsetting. Maybe he's remembering his creation. Maybe by looking at the mushroom cloud, he's remembering his creation. And it's a really somber moment where he's feeling all the things that Godzilla might possibly be feeling, thinking about how he went from being, I love that saying that many fans have said, where Godzilla went from being the last of his kind to the first of his kind. And that's a really upsetting thing to think about. Maybe that's what Godzilla's thinking about. Maybe he's looking on in fear. Fear of what he has done. Fear that he too is capable of this horrific power. Or maybe, potentially worst of all, depending on how you look at it, maybe he's thinking nothing at all. Maybe he's just looking at it because it's moving, and he's driven by nothing more than animalistic instinct, and he feels no rage, he feels no compassion. He's not driven by a sense of duty or vengeance. He's not driven by anything than just basic functions. And maybe that's worst of all. It kind of goes back to like what Seth Brendel's saying in The Fly. The idea that there's no reasoning with him. There's no compromise. It's just animalistic instinct. And maybe that's worst of all, because you can't do anything about that. You can't fight that. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to reason with him. And maybe that's worst of all. My personal favorite interpretation of it is that Godzilla's looking on in fear that he too is capable of that power, but that for him it's like a thing that had to be done. I like the idea that Godzilla is driven by vengeance, but maybe it's scarier if he's driven by nothing. And then the thing that makes that scene maybe the #1 Godzilla scene of all time for me is the Black Rain. The fact that for the first time ever in a Godzilla movie, that's being brought up, and it's not brought up to the extent that I wish it was. We don't explore that as deep as I wish we did, but for the first time ever in a Godzilla film, we're acknowledging some of the real horrors that had been unleashed upon Japan during the Second World War. The Black Rain is so creepy, man. Because it solidifies the fact that this is a tragedy above all else, and that even if you walk away from the devastation, you don't walk away unharmed. The idea that Shikishima may have radiation poisoning for the rest of his life is so upsetting. The fact that he had to fight so hard and he didn't deserve that, and he has been emotionally tormented and now physically tormented, it's really upsetting. I think that works really freaking well, man. I know that's the scene that I've talked to many people who the Black Rain is what pushed that scene to the next level. And for me, it definitely is. I was confused if Shikishima was infected by the rain or not when getting doused in it. Well, Isaac, we're not given an answer, so it's up to you to interpret. I mean, Logically speaking, yes, he would have had to be. If Godzilla's atomic breath left behind as much radioactive traces as they tell us specifically in the movie and in the very next couple shots that it did, then he would have had to be. And there's nothing he can ever do about that. He is permanently damaged by what happened there. Let me read the chat for a second. See what you guys are saying. What are you guys saying about this? The most disturbing scene, IMO, is when Ghidorah blasts Godzilla in the in the nuts in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. That's a great pick. That's a fantastic pick. That too disturbs me. Or the scene when Rodan drops Godzilla on his nuts just a little bit before that. What I love about Godzilla is that he embodies fears of Japan throughout the decades. For example, 1984 includes nukes and conflict between Russia and USA. Biolante includes biological weapons. I completely agree. I love that Godzilla can serve as a metaphor for all of our fears over time. Godzilla once again becomes a metaphor of teaching humanity the errors of their ways. Akiko crying when they first find Noriko isn't coming back. That got to me. I think IMO, the aftermath of just that scene, is really powerful. That scene is really upsetting. Shin Godzilla's eyes don't blink, almost as if he was never meant to blink. Yet when he fires his atomic breath in his fourth form / stage, those shiny black crystal orbs shield his eyes from the brightness or of thermal flares. Yeah, that's like a heat shield that some animals have. You put out the best kaiju. You put out the best of the kaiju culture out there. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Blueshin. I really appreciate that. On a more personal level, there are things in our lives that should have been handled, that we should have handled but didn't. And because of our lack of action, now we have a monster on our hands that has to be dealt with. Absolutely. The idea that, once again, going back to what I was saying earlier, the idea that one thing that has always really disturbed me is the idea of fate, and the idea that the thing that will have already sealed your fate has already happened and you don't know it. The decision that will have already resulted in your death has already been made, or something along those lines. That's, I think, a really creepy, disturbing thing to think about. And the fact that in this moment, Shikishima can look upon Godzilla, and for him, this is his fault because he didn't take the shot on Odo. Would it have killed Godzilla? I don't think so. And we'll never know. And he doesn't know. And he will never know. And for him, this moment is his fault because he didn't act. That decision, a year or two ago, that decision is what caused this. That domino effect is a really creepy thing to think about. That's a good thing. I'm glad you brought that up, Calico, because I completely agree. Shin Godzilla's atomic breath is my favorite Godzilla scene to date. It's also very disturbing, and Who Will Know plays in the background, which gives a sense of fear and onlooking the human cast is. Yes. Who here believes in? I don't know who that is. Hanuman. I know it's like a movie or something. It's like a rip-off character, I think. I look upon my work, yet ye mighty be. I look upon my works, ye mighty and despair. I don't know why that tripped me up so much. About the Black Rain, I did talk about that. I know I read that comment already. This was just an awesome scene. No one can dispute that. A masterpiece. Very true. I feel like that's always been the theme of Godzilla in 1954. Yes, the lack of action. Lucian says, you might not be the biggest fan of the Legendary series. Hey, that's a crazy thing to say because for the majority of my time on YouTube, I was considered the Legendary fanboy. But I do think that they've made quite a bit of decisions in the past 3 or 4 years that I've really not agreed with. So I guess that's my reputation now. But hey, can can we all agree they did Kong well? Yeah, I do think they did Kong. I really like what they did with Kong in those movies. D-Man, is that your favorite Atomic Breath? It is. Hey D-Man, how does a live stream on disturbing Gamera moments, especially in the Heisei, how does a live stream on disturbing Gamera moments, especially in the Heisei movies and Gamera the Brave? Are you asking how would I feel about doing one? Maybe someday. I don't really have the audience for that at the moment, but maybe someday. When Godzilla stares at the nuke, it's like he knows how he can do now. It's like he knows what he can do now, and he wants to use it to make us pay. I see. Yes. I think he figured that out when he blew up the Takao. I think he already kind of figured that out, but I agree. How often do you stream? How often did you stream during the GVK 2020 era? I don't remember. I actually streamed a lot. I would say I streamed regularly. I didn't stream all the time, but I streamed regularly from 2018 through 2020, and then I stopped. Hanuman is actually a Hindu deity. Oh, well, I did not know that. I had no idea. I thought that was like a Ultraman like spoof. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I must be. All right. Let's get to my number one. You guys have already been mentioning this, which I'm glad. 6 sock up. Oh, thanks. You like it? I was considering. I collected all the feeder cups for GXK, and I was considering just using them in my normal cup rotation. But the sock cups, which are the same type of cup, they actually don't hold up as well when you wash them as you'd hope. And I got this for free, so I got 2 of them for free, so I don't feel too loyal to them. So I use these ones, and I will not be using the GXK ones, unfortunately. All right. My number 1 Godzilla scene, and you already know what it is. You already know it's actually 3 moments combined. It's 3 different moments throughout the movie that I'm going to combine for the purpose of they serve the same thematic purpose. And there's one in particular that we are all of us are thinking of, and it's the one. And I agree, that's the one. But I wanted to combine all 3 because I think all 3 hold a very special weight, and all 3 of them together are the triple whammy that elevated the Godzilla franchise in the first place, beyond just being another monster film, into being true art. I think this is the triple whammy that made Godzilla as artistic of a film and a franchise as it is to this day. Partway through Godzilla's rampage through Tokyo in 1954's Godzilla, and after crippling the defenses of the Japanese Defense Force, a mother is seen holding her children. There's burning around, and they're watching the buildings burn, and Godzilla's closing in somewhere in the distance, and through sparks, she comforts her children by telling them that soon they will be joining their father. That scene is so upsetting. It's such a wonderfully powerful moment. I think many of us consider this scene to represent the children of the atomic bomb, and I think that goes beyond literally being the children of the atomic bomb. One of the bigger things I've seen people bring up in recent years is that those kids aren't old enough to have been children of a person who died to the atomic bomb. If their dad died to the atomic bomb in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, that happened in 1945. This takes place in 1954, 9 years later. Maybe only one of those girls could be possibly old enough, but definitely not all 3. Well, I think that's thinking about it too literally. On the one hand, their daddy could have died as a result of the atomic bomb because maybe he suffered radiation poisoning and he died in those 9 years. Maybe at some point he did pass away from exactly what we think he did. Maybe people in 1954 weren't thinking that deeply about it, and so when they saw that scene, they immediately thought back to the children of the atomic bomb and how children like that, if they're gonna die, might be joining their father in heaven who did die during that bomb or either bomb. It's a more recent discussion point that people have been bringing up, that those kids are not old enough. Because I remember forever, partly attributed to the audio commentary for the 1954 film, I believe the one done by Stephen Reifel and Ed Gutachevsky, I believe that's the one that perpetuated the rumor that these children would be joining their dad who died to the atomic bomb. But recently I've seen it discussed that they're not old enough. I think that's too literal. On the one hand, you could metaphorically think of it as like, children whose dads died in the war later joined their fathers in heaven when they got hit with the atomic bomb. And that's kind of what's happening here, you know? Or you could think of it as like, I would say don't think of it too literally. I think it's just supposed to represent the human impact that war has. That war, the atomic bomb, all of that had. And that's why it's so disturbing. I mean, the connections to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it's unmistakable throughout the whole movie and throughout that scene. And so I stand by that scene holds just as much weight, even if those girls aren't old enough to be that old, to be literally children of somebody who died in the atomic bomb. I stand by that it holds just the same weight for that reason. The movie doesn't stop there though. It continues. Later on, during what I think is the most impactful sequence in Godzilla film history, we revisit the idea of these children during the aftermath. So, in the aftermath of Godzilla's attack, we find people in the hospital, where we find a mother and a little child sitting by her side. This is just after Dr. Tanabe, in just one scene before, is holding the Geiger counter to a kid, a little kid, confirming that that kid has suffered a little dose of radiation poisoning and will not be surviving for very long. And that kid is going to be in for a very rough death, as many children who survived the atomic bombs were. Then we find a mother laying on the ground. Now, I've seen some people thinking maybe it's the same mother. It doesn't look like the same mother to me, but a mother sitting on the ground with a daughter sitting by the stretcher, and the mother is lifted off and carried off dead, and the daughter is sitting there crying as she watches. That scene, again, calling back to the war. That scene, I think, is more literally calling back to the aftermath of the atomic bomb, especially because of the kid with the radiation poisoning. But that scene, again, really hammers home those same themes in the same way, and it's really disturbing. Finally, because we don't stop there, we return to see children, not only in the hospital, sitting by their parents, treating them during a TV broadcast, as they're treating their parents' radiation burns, wounds, injuries, literal burns. All the while, we see a choir of schoolgirls singing a prayer for peace. We cut inside to see those girls lined up like tombstones in a cemetery, singing this haunting melody that has stuck with me my entire life, hoping for peace and light to return once more in the wake of Godzilla's attack. One thing that I don't see pretty much anybody discuss is how the same thing they're singing here, the same melody, that melody was used by composer Akira Ifukube in the movie The Burmese Harp, all about the aftermath of the war, a literal musical connection to his association with the war. And to if you've seen that movie, if you're a Japanese person who's seen the Burmese Harp or watches the Burmese Harp after Godzilla, now the two are indistinguishable from each other because it's the same song, just without the choir. It's actually more similar, I guess, to Godzilla on the Ocean Floor, which is the same melody. But it's those three moments combined that give the original Godzilla its unmatched tone, its unmatched mood, its unmatched weight, its unmatched atmosphere, horror, sorrow, and ties to the real world horrors of war and the atomic bomb. And it's that scene, I guess those three scenes, but really that scene of the mother holding her children, that is the most disturbing scene in Godzilla film history, undoubtable. There's no other comparison. And for a minute, I thought that this one, it might be too obvious. So I was going to put it somewhere else. I was going to put it a little higher up on the list. But it's obvious for a reason. Because it is, and it works. And that's the scene that makes that original movie as heavy as it is. And that's why when we talk about a movie being dark in tone, that's what we're thinking of. And that's why when they try and recapture some of that in Godzilla -1, they tap into the same themes, the same fears, the same real world connections as they did right here, because this scene works, and it has worked for 70 years, and it is still just as relevant now as it was all those years ago, because we still got the things to worry about. The world didn't move on from atomic bombs, it just stopped caring about them as much, but they're still here just as much as they were all the way back then. And so that is my list of the top 5 most disturbing moments in the Godzilla film franchise. And that's my number 1. And I would love to hear what you guys think. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Mr. Bro says, what if he survived due to radiation poisoning from what if he died due to radiation poisoning from surviving the bomb? Exactly what I said. That's exactly what I proposed as well. So you and I are on the same wavelength there. I don't know if anyone mentioned this, but the summoning ritual in the Planet Eater is a really disturbing scene in my opinion. The Orca boss, we did talk about that. I did speak about that a little while ago in the stream. This stream will go up as a video after the fact. And then I do think, based on our conversation right now, whatever conversation we have right here, right now, whatever conclusions we come to, if there's anything on my list that I decide to change based on your suggestions or whatever, I do think I'm going to try and put together a shorter version of this as a video for the channel, but this live stream is going to stay up regardless. So yeah, we did talk about that, but you can go back and check out the whole stream once it's over, and you'll find that we did talk about that. That was not what I consider to be the most disturbing scene in the Planet Eater, as I discussed, but I do think that scene is really upsetting. I feel like even if Shikishima shot the Godzillasaurus, they would have survived. They would have survived the PTSD of not knowing that, and that self-doubt is the scariest part. I feel like even if Shikishima shot the Godzillasaurus, they would have survived the PTSD of not knowing at the end. The self-doubt, the scariest part, he will never know. He will live with that forever. I see what you're saying, Marco. So basically you're saying you're saying the thing that makes that so upsetting is the fact that he didn't take the shot. And I agree. That is what makes that so effective and so upsetting, is that he didn't take the shot. And so he will never get closure on that. He'll never get closure on if he could have averted all of the damage and destruction that came and all of the suffering that has happened or will happen because of Godzilla. He'll never know. But I think even if he did take the shot, it wouldn't have worked. But he'll never know, and we won't either. I did notice some of the smaller characters and extras were used in different scenes, also in 54. Yes, that was done very deliberately by director Ishiro Honda in order to create a sense of lived reality. A world where you could see a character on a train saying that they don't want to evacuate for Godzilla, and then they can show up a few scenes later, face to face with Godzilla on a pleasure cruise, and there's nothing they can do to get out of his way. Time to evacuate is over. That was the point. It was supposed to be a way to make the world feel real and lived in. So it might be the same mother, but I don't think it is the same mother. That scene always kills me when I hear the screams of sadness. Yes. When the civilians on the boat watching Godzilla die... you would think that they'll celebrate, but instead, not a single happy cheer was happening during that moment. Yeah, that's because I feel like the Ishiro Honda biography put it best when it said at the end of the movie there wasn't a sense of, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's got this really profound quote about the movie, like, at the end of the film there is no sense of rejoice, just a profound sense of loss. And it's because you lose Serizawa and you've lost so much to get there in the first place. It makes the whole thing work so well. Such a devastating sequence. And Serizawa's death is really sad, and you also, in that moment, you feel bad for Godzilla because he didn't choose to be that. He didn't choose to be what he was. He was made that way. And so you feel bad for it when they go find him in his bed under the sea and they kill him. This is why my favorite Godzilla film is still the first. It's beautiful, tragic, disturbing, and an absolute masterpiece. I completely agree. There aren't as many disturbing scenes as I remember there was in the franchise, but I guess the Shin ending comes close to 54. Well, I didn't go through all of the scenes I could have put on the list. I could have put scenes like Godzilla's attack on Odo in -1 on this list. I'm sure there's plenty of other scenes in GMK or other Godzilla films that could have gone on this list. These were just my top 5 picks, but I'm sure you could have put many others on the list as well. What's up, Mr. Gojira? How's it going? The most disturbing scene is when Kong pulled apart the warthog. Well, it sure was for that child in my audience when I saw the movie opening night. That was hilarious. I think the 54 flashback in GMK is pretty disturbing and very underrated, I feel. I think they could have gone further with it, because I agree. I really wished they had gone full Gamera with it. You remember in Gamera 3 when we flash back to the events of the first movie and there's that nightmarish Gamera design? I really like that scene in GMK. Well, it's the child, what's his name? Is his name Tachibana? I don't remember. I think it is. It's when you flash back to the general when he was a kid. He's running through the streets. He's looking for his parents and he can't find them and they're dead because of Godzilla. That's a pretty disturbing sequence. And I wish we could have seen a nightmarish Godzilla in that sequence. I don't think it would have killed Godzilla. Yeah, me either, Alex. I was hoping for some Godzilla theater merchandise like Popcorn Bucket for -1 re-release in a few weeks, but it seems unlikely. Yeah, I agree. I would be surprised, but hey, you know, they put they put The Batman back in theaters and they released some Batman Popcorn Buckets and merch, and so I think at the very least you might see some of the GXK theater merch pop back up in stores. Could happen. Yes, Captain Tachibana. Awesome. Glad I remembered that, Marco. I haven't revisited the Millennium series as much as I've seen the Showa series, so sometimes that stuff slips my mind. I think hearing Godzilla 54's death roar after the Oxygen Destroyer kills him is haunting, disturbing. I think there's a couple Godzilla death roars that are pretty disturbing. That one's pretty disturbing, and then Godzilla's scream of agony when he's being literally pulled apart by the pressure in -1, I think that's pretty messed up as well. That scene's pretty unsettling, although I wouldn't call it disturbing. Don't forget that Gamera 3 looked better than Godzilla 2000 considering they were released the same year in Japan. Well, they, you know, different production budgets, different production schedules, different directors, different art styles, everything like that. And they were going for different things. But yeah, I would probably agree. PKMN, you might be right, Pikmon. Yeah, the most disturbing scene is when Minya's born. And he's crying. The Kamakuras are smacking him around. Good stuff, man. Well, you successfully got me with a little made you look right there. I see a spider on your door. I don't. But you got me. You got me to look. I heard the actor of Tachibana was in a funk band in the 70s. Very well could be. Bushin Ryukat. Bushin Ryukat Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for the... Oh, I'm just kidding, D-Man. Well, okay, Pickman. Thank you so much for the super chat. That's really generous. I really appreciate that. In my head, I wrote Godzilla -1 sequel, G Rebirth, 25 years later. Japan quickly developed tech to find a cure to the radiation. Shiki's daughter is a scientist. Noriko died and Shiki barely? Do you mean Noriko died and Shikishima has just passed away? Doctor from film has a son who builds Jaguar 2 to fight Jaguar to fight Godzilla. I see what you're saying. So Nora's son builds Jaguar to fight Godzilla. That's a pretty interesting pitch. I like the I have a pitch for -1 sequel as well. I've talked about it in videos. I actually recorded a full pitch video, but I never released it. I just thought it would take a lot of work to edit that video, but maybe I should. But I have a pitch as well for a -1 sequel. I did not jump forward as far as you, but I like the idea of jumping forward to see where things head in the future. 25 years later, what does that place us in? 25 years later for 1947, that's 1967, so that's 1982. So we're jumping to 1982, unexplored territory for the Godzilla franchise, which would be cool. But I like the idea of jumping forward to see how the world has progressed post the events of that movie. I love some of the different roars from the 54 films. Some of them are so creepy. I always love the first Godzilla roar, the one that's not used often, but I was glad to hear this bad boy right here use it, and I was glad to hear -1 used it again. It's the less iconic of the 254 roars, and I will not be doing an impression, because when I do an impression of a Godzilla roar, my older brother makes fun of me so relentlessly that I delete the video, and then 10 years later, I try and go back to find the video and I can't find it because I deleted it out of shame 10 years ago. If it was Kumonga on my door, that'd be pretty sick. I'd see if he'd team up with me. I'd see if I could ride him. The Kong heads in GXK are pretty disturbing. Yeah, the ape heads, MM64, the ape heads that are, also, what's up? Welcome to the stream. How's it going, man? The Kong heads that are, I guess, just the ape heads that are on the freaking spikes. That's pretty disturbing as well. Another disturbing scene would be when Destroya vomits blood. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Godzilla vs. Destroya that could go on the list. There's a lot of horror elements to that movie. I don't think Destroya vomiting blood is disturbing, but I think it does have a real strong horror element to it. When Godzilla's getting slashed and blood is spraying everywhere, that's pretty upsetting, and I think that's pretty awesome as well. Anger's getting his jaws snapped by Mechagodzilla did me no favors as a kid. Anger, yeah, that scene never disturbed me as a kid, and I never felt too horrible. I always felt bad for Anguirus, but he lived, so I felt okay with it. I felt like he could probably heal from it. There's a lot of stuff in Godzilla vs. Gigan that I felt worse about, like Godzilla getting his head beaten, the blood coming out, and Gigan getting his face buzzsawed. That stuff really unsettled me and disturbed me as a kid, that's for sure. The most disturbing scene, the poor little kitten stuck in the sludge in Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. Well, that's not a bad pick. That whole sequence where Hedorah comes out in the factory and he's slurping up all the juice and he's getting all powerful and Godzilla shows up and starts swinging him around and everybody's getting killed. That whole scene is pretty disturbing. And that scene really unsettled me as a kid. There was 2 Godzilla films that gave me nightmares as a kid, and it was Godzilla vs. Hedorah and it was Godzilla vs. Destroya. Those 2 freaked me out. And it was primarily because of that scene in Godzilla vs. Hedorah and the scene I talked about earlier with the fish in Godzilla vs. Destroya. I think Zilla can appear in -1 sequel. It's not far from my pitch. Another moment for me is in Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, when Godzilla roars, awakening the cells of the old Godzilla, leading to the possession of Mechagodzilla to cause destruction. That scene is freaky. What would have taken it to the next level and made me feel like it was a truly disturbing sequence is if Akane was actively inside Kiryu, piloting Kiryu, and lost control, and there was nothing she could do but sit and watch from inside the cockpit of Kiryu's head as the rampage occurred. That would push it to the next level to me. Shikishima still lives in my story, but also affected by the virus. His life inspires Noriko to quickly find a cure. I like it. I like Shikishima surviving. He deserves to survive. Absolutely not, Geo Channel. I will not be doing an impression. Someone pay for him to do a roar impression. Okay, Mickey Mouse. Why don't you do it? I'm not going to do the roar impression. How many brothers do you have? My brother is almost exactly 9 years older than me. I'm 27. I have 2. He's 3 years older than me and 7 years younger than me. I want the Yamazaki go. I want the Yamazaki. I'm assuming Godzilla from -1-0, with the last film being called Godzilla 1, showing Japan getting back to normalcy and showing a new era of technology, hope in the 60s. But then Godzilla. I kind of like that, Marco. I kind of like that. I want the Yamazaki to go, I see what you're saying, to go from -1 to 0 to eventually 1. I like that. Yes, that scene is so primal and shows Godzilla has a sort of immortality. Isaac, what scene are we talking about here? Oh, yes. I see. The Kiryu sequence. Good stuff. I like that idea. That Godzilla has a sense of immortality as shown through that scene. That's creepy. I like that. The fishboat scene in The Return of Godzilla is disturbing. That was one that I really thought about putting on when their skeletons are all sunken in and creepy at the beginning of that. That's great. Also, just gotta say, because I didn't bring it up or address it, this is about Godzilla movies, but I feel like pretty much the entire show, Godzilla Singular Point, I find to be disturbing when you think about. I think that whole show has so many wonderful, disturbing moments. And I think Monarch Legacy of Monsters has a lot of really disturbing moments as well. That scene that mirrors Godzilla 84, where they're going through the ship and they're discovering the bodies, and it's in the second episode with that creepy old camera, you know, the film, and they're turning the camera and they're seeing the corpses all strung up to the wall and stuff. That's really freaky. We didn't explore that enough for me to count that on my list, but that scene was pretty freaky. And then I think the idea that, you know, Keiko lost, what was it, like, I'm trying to remember, what did she lose, like 50 years of her life, and her son is now like older than her? That's freaky. That's really freaky as well. That's disturbing to think about. That is a disturbing thing to think about. Yes, Gyra eating people is disturbing, and that would have been my number 1 if War of the Gargantuas was a Godzilla movie. Also, please make that pitch video. I would really love to watch it. Maybe. I should. I really should. I just got here, so I'll say the most disturbing Godzilla scene, in my opinion, to me, is the final time the oxygen destroyer is used in the fish tank in the 1954. The music, the visual, is the first time the oxygen destroyer is used in the fish tank in Godzilla 1954. The music and visuals really whatever. The text cut off, so here's the continuation. The visuals and music really help, and it's scary to see how destructive the oxygen destroyer is. Jeff, I totally agree. That sequence really works on so many levels. It's very gothic. It's very classic horror. It's very stylish. I love that sequence as well. Kiryu's my goat. Glad to see some Kiryu love. I just want the -1 sequel to have Anguirus fight Godzilla. The average Goji fan, I think many people agree. What's your favorite Mecha Godzilla? It's Kiryu. Zilla is my man, and I hope he appears in Godzilla -1 sequel from the G-Cells. I would highly doubt it, but it would be fun. The ending of Godzilla -1 opens the possibility of a terrible future for Japan. Yes, it absolutely does. GMK has some creepy scenes. The hospital, Godzilla's brutal death, as well as the scene with his heart beating. Something MO paid -1 paid homage to at the end. Yes, we did discuss GMK earlier. I totally agree. I think there's a lot of dark humor that throws off the disturbing elements from being as disturbing as they could have been, but I do agree. I think -1 does that ending stinger with the revival of Godzilla in a more unsettling and sadder way, especially because you get the impression that the plan that worked the first time isn't going to work the second time, whereas in GMK, I feel like that's a world with enough mysticism for Godzilla to still have some trouble if he comes back. I find it disturbing that Millie Bobby Brown just got married this year. I always find it disturbing when people my age or younger get married. I agree. What's up, D-Man? Just checked out of work. What did I miss? Godzilla King of Kaiju, you unfortunately missed the stream, as we have reached pretty much the ending here, and I will be wrapping it up here. So, sorry, man, but we counted down the top, basically 7 most disturbing moments in the Godzilla franchise. And this will go up afterwards, so you can watch it. You can, of course, watch it later. In the anime trilogy, when the nanometal takes over some of the characters, that is really disturbing. Oh, the idea that Yuko's alive but stuck in like this purgatory because of the nanometal. That whole scene when they discover Mechagodzilla City and that creepy music is playing and it spears the servum and it starts to eat it. That's all really creepy. That's all really disturbing. I think the anime trilogy is filled with disturbing moments, just like Singular Point, and I think that is all some stuff that makes those movies really underrated. In 1954, we get introduced to the Oxygen Destroyer for the first time. Yeah, we already talked about that one. Someone else said that pitch, but I like that you guys both have that. That means that scene really worked on the level that they wanted it to. Toho will never touch Zilla unless it's to destroy him. I tend to agree. Holy crap, Godzilla King of Kaiju. Thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, man. Shut up and take my money. Enough said. Everybody, please give some freaking shout outs to Godzilla King of Kaiju. That is so freaking nice. I really appreciate that, man. Maybe I'll go back to, I'll go back to, I'll do that thing. I used to do this. I don't know why I stopped. I think I just stopped because I stopped streaming as much and I forgot that I used to do this. But I'll start putting out those community shout outs after the streams to thank all my super chats, because I really appreciate it. And it really goes such a long way towards helping this channel out. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you. And I appreciate all your support, and I appreciate whenever you show up. Thank you, man. I want Anguirus to be in Zero, which would take place in 1954. That's cool. I like your idea there. And Mothra in Godzilla 1. It would also take place in 1967, so 20 years after Godzilla -1, the trilogy being about Akiko's life. I love centering the trilogy around Akiko. That's such a cool idea. Yeah, I love that pitch. I love the idea of jumping forward about 10 years each time. Why? I guess 1967 just so it could be 20 years later. Not a bad idea. I like it. I like it. I think the ending of Godzilla Monster Planet is scary. Imagine just finishing up a battle with Godzilla just to see a behemoth arise from a nearby mountains. Not only that, but the fact that Haruo ends that movie trapped under rubble, watching with literally nothing he can do to stop it. That's really, really unsettling as well. The fact that he watched everybody die because he decided to put them on this path. Like I said, that's what's so creepy about that to me. G-Man, can you guess how many lines in Godzilla video games exist, not including guest appearances? Can you guess how many line Godzilla video games exist? Can you guess how many times do I have to read this before I catch every single word you just said? What the freaking heck? G-Man, can you guess how many mainline Godzilla video games exist, not including guest appearances? Well, that sure helps clear that up. I'm going to guess there's like 9. I don't think there's too many. I think there's probably about 9. Hey, Godzilla just freaking died in that volcano over there, which means it's basically time to wrap this bad boy up over here. A lot of people don't talk about this moment in GMK, but technically Mothra got soldiers killed while avoiding Godzilla's atomic breath. She sure did. She flew right past that, what is it, Tokyo Tower, and they get obliterated. W hype. Thank you guys for shouting out Godzilla King of Kaiju. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much. It's Graydon. It's Graydon? It's Graydon. Thank you so friggin' much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. And it's your 20th super chat on the live stream. That's cool that they added those banner things. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. Again, I really appreciate that. 57? There's no way it's 57 mainline Godzilla video games, not including guest appearances. $57? How would you direct a disturbing Godzilla game? I don't know. I don't know enough about video games to be able to say how I direct one. Naughty Man, thank you for creating enjoyable and reachable content. Of course, Godzilla King of Kaiju, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. I don't blame her. It's not like she spared them with her web stuff. Oh, it's not like she sprayed them with her web stuff. I see what, he's talking about Mothra. She definitely killed she definitely went out of her way to kill those people at the lake. Maybe she didn't go out of her way, but she killed the people at the lake more directly and deliberately. Thank you guys so much. Another scene is Godzilla's first appearance on Oto Island in Godzilla -1. Jeff, yes, I completely agree. We talked about that a little earlier, but I totally agree. Oh yeah, also how Mephies is in control of Ghidorah. Yeah, that whole, like I said, Godzilla trilogy and especially Planet Eater is filled with disturbing moments. And like I said, in my opinion, if I was to really rank it, if I was to rank it with the show, with the movies, I think something in Godzilla's Singular Point, from the idea that I think something in there would probably rank in the top 2 or 3 on this list. It would probably be in the number 3 on this list, would be some of the stuff from Godzilla Singular Point. I just think that show had so many creepy ideas and themes, and I thought it was really cool. All right, guys, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you so much to all of the people who donated. I really appreciate that. Where can I see your guys' names? There's a tab for that. Here we go. Blueshin Rue Cat, thank you so much. Godzilla King of Kaiju, thank you so much. It's Graydon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna wrap it up here. I really appreciate all your guys' love, all your support. Thank you to all my patrons over on Patreon for all the support. It keeps the channel running. Thank you to all of you guys for tuning in. Shout out to all of you guys for tuning back in who are my regulars. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope to do more of these, and I would love for you guys to leave your top 5 lists in the comments below. Please let me know. Once this is over, please leave a comment, or do it now, of what your top 5 Godzilla, most disturbing Godzilla moments are. I would love to see it. Thank you all so much. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man out. Bye-bye.